I'll go up to Hey. So to explain this idea, that it's within the nature of every Jewish person that they do not want and cannot be disconnected from Elokus, from godliness. How does that work? Why is that? Why indeed is it that the Jewish soul cannot be disconnected from Hashem? In the Issa Eitz Chaim, it says in Eitz Chaim, which is the writings of the Arizal, the yesh nitzitz katan echad boira shemislabish benitzitz echad nivra hanikri yechida, that there is a little spark of creator that encloses itself in a spark of the created, and that is called the yechida. Meaning, our soul, the makeup of our soul is that there is a bit of the creator, of Hashem himself, and that bit, that spark of the Creator encloses itself in the created being, and it's called the Yechida, the part of the soul that is one with Hashem. Now, what happens when we say that the spark of the Creator encloses itself within the spark of the created, which is us, it means in such a way that they become one thing, that the Creator and the created are united as one. It's not two different things, two different parts of our soul. Our soul is a unification of the Creator and the created. And this identity, this aspect, this godly identity, is found in every single Jew. Not regardless of what revealed personality a Jew may have, or what their level is concerning the other levels of their soul, how spiritually attuned and high and holy they've become. Regardless of all that, the spark of God that is in the spark of the soul, that is equally found in every Jew, no matter who. The kelim in yonam hagabala v'schalkus. Now, we're going to go into a bit of a Kabbalistic analysis now of this spark of the soul. We said that the spark of the Creator enclosed within the spark of the created. Meaning a piece of Hashem enters into our soul, which is a created being. We are a part of creation. Hashem is the Creator. A part of Him enclosed within a part of us. A divine spark enclosed within our soul and become one. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek explains at length that the spark that is created, which is our soul, that unites with the Creator, the source of our soul is from the kelim, the vessels. And kelim, vessels mean limitation and division. Let's explain. That in the spiritual realms, in the divine realms, there's a description of the energy, the divine energy that is invested in creation as being made up of oris and kelim, light and vessels. Light means energy, vessels means a container. That every spiritual reality has to have light, which is its energy, its power, and the vessel, which is its container, that which limits it, which holds it. The 10 spheres, when we talk about 10 spheres, so the 10 spheres, Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, etc., what are they? They are divine energies that have been put into vessels, into containers. So there's a divine energy called Chachma, which is a light that is contained in a vessel called Chachma. The Tzemach Tzedek explains at length, and in many Maamarim it says how really Hashem's energy is one. Hashem is one. But different containers give Hashem's energy different flavor, different shape. Just like you can pour water into various glasses, and each glass can have a different color, which makes the water look a different color. So too the divine energy is one. Hashem is one. But He can put His energy into a container, and that container can give the energy a tinge, a different color. So the divine energy is light put into containers, into vessels. And so the 10 spheres, what is chesed? What does chesed mean? Why is chesed different to gevura? Both chesed and gevura are divine light, divine energy. But there's divine energy in a container that is white, and there's divine energy in a container that is red, for example. Meaning there's divine energy that is contained, that is processed in a way of chesed, of love, of kindness. And then there's the same divine energy but put into a different container, into a container of gvura to be expressed as harshness or strictness or justice. So the Tzemach Tzedek explains at length in one of his Maamarim that where is the source of our soul, the created soul, the soul, where does that come from? It comes from the world of Atzilus. It comes from the highest world. It comes from the 10 spheres of Atzilus. But where in the 10 spheres of Atzilus? In the Kalim. We come from the vessels. Our soul is an expression of the vessels of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Now, that means that our soul comes from the part of the divine energy that is limited. A container is a limitation. And so that seems to somewhat minimize the power that our soul could possibly have if we come from the world of limitation, the Kalim, the vessels of the 10 spheres. But we're going to explain. Mikol Malkum, second last line in the middle. Mikol Malkum hara yudush sherish and neshama sum pnimius hakelim. However, it's clear from other sources that when we say that the soul is sourced in the kalim of the 10 spheres, it's referring to the pnimius hakelim, the inner aspect of the kalim. Ubefrat bechinas yechida shesharshahu me'or machtzav hanashamas shulavush lemachtzav haspheres. And particularly if we're talking about the level of yechida, that the level of yechida of the soul, its source is from the light that is the place that the soul was hewn out of, which is the garment for where the spheres themselves come from. In other words, the source of the yechida is the same source as where the spheres, the 10 spheres themselves come from the very essence of Hashem. Shem chitzonis ak upnimius ak, which is referring to the outer level of ak and the inner level of ak. What does that mean? We'll talk in a minute. The machtzav hanashamas hu chitzonis ak, or machtzav haspheres hu pnimius ak. That the real source of the soul is from what's called chitzonius ak. And the source of the 10 spheres of Atzilus themselves is pnimius ak. What's ak? What does ak stand for? Aleph kuf. It stands for Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon means primordial man. In Kabbalah, what ak means is the level of the divine that was the very first thought of creation. Meaning before there was anything emanated, before anything was realized, before creation, even the highest level, the spiritual levels of creation were realized, there was first a plan, a vision, a picture of what would be. And that is described in Kabbalah as Adam Kadmon, the original thought of creation.
Is that like in Bereshit talks about Hashem creating Adam, and then later on talks about it later?
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
One's like
So a Kabbalistic interpretation of that would be that there was the picture, the vision, which is called Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, which was a thought. What do I want? I want man. I want the human being. That was the first picture of creation. Then there's the Hishtalshelus of the worlds to actualize that vision. So it's two stages of creation. So that's what Adam Kadmon means in Kabbalistic terms. Now, it's explained that the source of the 10 spheres is in Pnimius Ak, the inner level of Ak, of Adam Kadmon. The source of the soul is in the outer level of Ak, of Adam Kadmon. Now, what does that mean? Ve'ein ze beis dvarim nivdolim ze mezeh, ela dan hashamas shesharshim pnimius hakelim, har pnimius hakelim hi miyuchedes im ha'or ha'mislabish b'soicha. So it's not like two separate things here. What we're saying is that the souls, that they're sourced in the inner level of the Kalim, which is Chitzonius Ak, the outer level of Ak, but because Kalim is Chitzonius, but the inner level of that, the inner level of the Chitzonius, the Pnimius of the Chitzonius. Now what does that mean? That the Pnimius of the Kalim, the inner level of the Kalim, is one with the light that's in it. Let's look at a metaphor to understand what we're talking about. In the physical world, the inner part of a vessel is right next to whatever is filling the vessel. So you have a cup of coffee. The cup is the vessel, the coffee is the light that fills the vessel. Now the vessel itself, there's two parts of the vessel. There's the chitzonis, there's the outer side of the vessel, and the function of the outer side is for you to be able to hold it, to pick it up, to lift it, to manipulate it. That's why there's the outside of the vessel. The inside of the vessel is what actually contains the coffee and is next to and within, touching the coffee. So too with spiritual kalim, the same idea applies. That the kalim, there's the inner kalim and the outer of the kalim. The outer of the kalim is in order to influence the outside, to relate to the outside. The inner part of the kalim is to relate to the the light that is in, and is therefore one with that light. So when we say that the souls are sourced in the kalim, but our souls are sourced in the inner part of the kalim, which means that which is directly connected to the light that fills the kalim. And so too, so just like in the physical sense of a vessel, the inner part of it is connected to the light, so too, the spiritual meaning of kalim, that the inner part of the kli is one with the light. Not only that, it's one with the essence of the light. The outer part of the keli, the vessel, apart from the fact that it is there to connect to that which is on the outside, right? The outer part of the vessel is for us to be able to pick up the cup. It's not one with what's inside it. It's not connected to what's inside it. As far as the outer part of the cup is concerned, what the cup is filled with doesn't really make a difference. The outer part of the cup is for the outside world to connect, not for what's inside it. The light that passes through the kli and influences the outside is only a level of light that can relate to the outside. But the inner part of the vessel, it's one with that which is in the vessel. It's in fact, it's connected to the light as it is in its essence, which never comes down to the next level. We're going to understand with another metaphor. Let me just explain what we're talking about, because this is a bit esoteric. The Rebbe here is using the metaphor of a vessel to understand a stage in Hishalshalus, that there's the light, there's the divine energy that needs to go from its source down into this world, which is what's Hishalshalus. Now, in that process, the metaphor that's used is that there's a light and there's the vessel. Every light is contained in a vessel. That vessel is somewhat dilutes the light, so the next level can handle the light that's in it. A container what does a container mean? To contain, to limit, to define. So the light from a higher world, for it to reach a lower world, it needs to go into a vessel. That vessel will contain the light as it is in its higher form, limit it, and then allow a lesser light to reach the next world. Where the metaphor of a cup of coffee breaks down in this case is that the coffee stays in the cup. Like that's where it is. And if you want to pour it out of the cup, it's a different thing. In the metaphor of the lights of the spiritual lights, the light enters the cup, the keli, the vessel. It is there contained, and then the vessel allows a secondary light to move to the next level, to go down to the next world. So unlike the cup, which if it would be spilling coffee, it wouldn't be fulfilling its purpose, the divine vessels, each vessel contains a light, limits it, and then the limited form of light is then allowed to filter to the next level.
Is it more like a thin curtain rather than
a thin curtain or a filter is probably a more accurate way of depicting it than a cup. Yeah.
Is it Tzimtzum we're talking about?
Yeah. This is a form of Tzimtzum. It's the Tzimtzum of a light to allow for the next world. So yeah, like a filter or a glass, light going through a glass that then colors the light, or that type of thing, or filters the light. That's probably a more accurate way of depicting it than a cup of coffee. So what do you have here? At first we just said you've got the light and you've got the vessel. You've got the energy that has to go into a vessel which limits it to allow it to go to the next stage. But more specifically, the vessel itself, there's the outer part of the vessel that gives to the next level, the lower level. There's the inner part of the vessel that contains the light that's within it. The outer part of the vessel just relates to the outside world. The inner part of the vessel relates to the light within. The outer part of the vessel only experiences the light that has already been filtered. The inner part of the vessel experiences the light as it is in itself, in its higher level, in its higher state.
Is it the Yechida part of the soul that's the internal?
Yeah.
All parts of the soul.
But here we're talking about all parts of the soul. That the source of the soul comes from the inner part of the vessel, which means it comes from Kalim, from the ability to contain. But which part of that vessel? The inner part of the vessel that's connected to the light as it is in its source. Because the light, there's two levels of light here we're talking about as well. There's light as it is in its essence, as it is on its own. Then there's the light as it has become diluted and ready for the next stage. The inner part of the vessel connects to the light as it is in its higher state. The outer part of the vessel only relates to, or only connects to the light as it's being translated to the next level.
So the inner from 1 to 10 is still the same? Like, just it's pure all the way down?
Yeah. Yeah. But, well, not really. The Chachma receives the light in its original form, dilutes it, and gives to Bina.
Okay.
Bina's inner light is Chachma's external light. The leftovers, the trickle down that came from Chachma is what Bina receives as the light. So there is a process of filtering that each level receives the lower from before it. So there's a difference between receiving the light as it is in its essence or receiving a light that has already been diluted and filtered. The metaphor that the Rebbe uses now is a very interesting one. It's used very often in Chassidus. The difference between giving birth to a child or teaching a student. They're often compared and contrasted in Chassidus. The difference between giving life to a next generation or giving wisdom to a student. There's a parent-child relationship and there is a student-teacher relationship. And both of them are very similar in a way, because both of them are a form of hashpah, of giving over, of influence, of expressing yourself towards another. The obvious difference is that giving birth to a child is the child is existing because of you, whereas teaching a student, the student already exists, you're giving them wisdom. But they're very similar. Both cases are you're taking a part of your inner energy and you're sharing it with another. What's the difference between the two? Let's have a look. Let's look at the difference between hashpah of seichel, giving intellect, or hashpah satipa, giving of your seed to give birth to a child. You see we're on the line that starts with the word haseichel, halfway down the page. The hashpah haseichel masharav mashpia letalmidoi, when you're giving of your intellect, meaning a teacher who is teaching to a student. It is a more external hashpah. What you're giving over is more external. Meaning what? When a Rav teaches a Talmud, so is the Rav giving his intellect to the student?
No.
What's he giving?
Ideas.
His ideas, but is that not his intellect?
It's an expression of the intellect. It's not his intellect.
It's a stepping down.
It's an expression of intellect. It's a stepping down. Why? If you have, let's say, a genius who is giving a lecture, do you become a genius by listening to the lecture? No, not necessarily. If he's a good speaker, if he's a good teacher, so then you'll learn something. You'll get something out of it. You'll have an inkling of the genius of your teacher, but you don't become a genius. You don't get the mind of the teacher. Why? Because he can't give you his mind. No one can give anyone their mind. All you can give is concepts, thoughts, principles, ideas from the mind. So what is the act of teaching? The act of teaching is taking your understanding, packaging it in words that the students can hear and listen to and receive, and then it becomes a part of their mind. But you don't take your brain and give it to them. So what's happening is you're taking your intellect, you're putting it in a package, in a vessel, which is the words that you're saying, and the student is receiving the words. And that's why it's possible the student won't receive it. Sometimes you could listen to a genius talking, you don't know what he's talking about. You don't understand it. Why? Because he can't give you understanding. You have to understand what he's saying. He can only dilute his genius and give you a taste of it, but you may or may not be able to receive it. And even if you do receive it, you don't become his genius. You don't reach his level immediately from hearing it. He can't give you his brain. So what that shows is that the hashpah, the gift that the teacher is giving the student, is a hashpah chitzonis, is an external gift. It's not the inner brain of the teacher that has been given to the student. It is an external expression of the teacher's brain that is being shared with the student. It's a diluted, limited, packaged expression of his wisdom that has been given to the student. And therefore, it could take a long time for a student to reach the same level of understanding that his teacher has. Like it says in the Gemara that it takes 40 years. 40 years for a student to reach where the Rabbi was. That's why there were 40 years in the desert. Moshe Rabbeinu had to teach them for 40 years until they finally got what he was saying. It takes 40 years to really appreciate what your teacher was saying. We're talking about a real teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. We're not talking about just any old maths teacher. So what does that mean? Why does it take 40 years to fully appreciate? The Rebbe, by the way, in Tafshin Nun, 40 years after Tafshin Yud, after the previous Rebbe passed away, made a big deal out of that year. So now we can finally really get what he was saying in his lifetime, 40 years after he passed away. So why does it take 40 years? You sit in a class, you hear your teacher talk, you hear the Rebbe speak, so it should affect you now. Why does it take 40 years? You may understand everything that the Rav said, everything the teacher said, but you don't reach his level of understanding by understanding what he's saying. Because he's not giving you his brain, he's giving you an external expression of his wisdom. And for you to, from that, reach his wisdom, that takes 40 years of absorbing, of reviewing. Because it's an external expression of the mind of the teacher. However, contrasting that with the giving of your seed to give birth to a child, which is also a form of sharing of yourself with another. That is an internal, an inner aspect of yourself that you're sharing. To give birth to somebody who will have the same faculties that you have. Right? That when a parent gives birth to a child, that is not a diluted expression of self being shared like a teacher giving to a student. That is the inner very essence being shared to give birth. When you're teaching, you're not giving your brain to the student. When you give birth, you are giving your brain to your child. A piece of your brain, a piece of yourself, a piece of your essence is being given over to the child. The fact that we give birth and the child that is born has a similarity to ourselves doesn't just mean that their personality and their revealed self is similar to yours. It means that the child is an expression of your essence, of your inner self. Which is why a child could even be stronger than a parent. But that is also from the parent. This is an interesting idea. The Rebbe is saying that it says in the Gemara that that a child could have more strength than the parent. Sometimes you have a child that is stronger, that is smarter, that can run faster, that is taller, that has talents that are greater than the parent. If you think about it, how's that possible? How is it possible for a child to excel beyond what the parent achieved? If you are a product of your parent, so then how can you do anything more than your parents do? How's it possible? How could you be better, smarter, taller, faster? Where do you get that from? You came from them, so how can you excel them in any way? You understand the question? Logically, you can only go as far as where you came from. To go beyond where you came from, how's it possible? So Chassidus explains that what you receive from your parents is not their revealed self, but their inner self. Not their external self, but their internal essence. That's what a parent gives to a child. And so therefore, you are not an expression of your parents' achievements, you're an expression of your parents' potential. Not what they have achieved, but what they could achieve. So, let's say, intelligence of a person. So if you measure somebody's intelligence, well, all you can measure, all you can see is the intelligence that they have reached, that they have actualized. You can't see the intelligence that they potentially could have reached. That's not visible. That's the inner intelligence. The intelligence that somebody has achieved is based on their education and their effort and their opportunities and their ability to express their potential. But what their potential itself is, how intelligent they could be, you don't know. A child is not an expression of what the parent is, it's an expression of what the parent could be, the essence of the parent, the potential of the parent. So therefore a child could be smarter than the parent. Why? Because the child is an expression of essence. The parent has not fully utilized their entire potential. Whereas the child starts from there, starts from that level, and therefore can exceed the parent.
And that would also apply to their spiritual potential as well.
What do you mean?
In terms of the child could get to a place that the parent may not have gotten.
Yeah, well, that for sure. The spiritual path of a child is quite independent from parents, because the soul doesn't come from the parents. The garment of the soul, the expression of the soul comes from the parent, but the soul itself comes from Hashem, and so the child's spiritual path is quite independent from the parent's spiritual path or power. Here we're just talking even about just physical faculties. So height as well. How high somebody grows. A child could be taller than the parents, because the inner power of the parent could have been to grow bigger than they did grow. just didn't get expressed for whatever reason. And so too with their ability to run fast, or musical talent, or who knows what. There are all types of things that the child could excel beyond where the parents reached, because the child is an expression of the essence of the parent. Not the external, but the internal level of a parent. So therefore, when the Talmud says Yofa koich ben mikoich av, which means that the child's powers are greater than the parents, so Chassidus points out, it says Yofa koich ben mikoich av, that the greater powers of the child are from the parent. Mikoich could be than, or it could be from. That the child's greatness is greater than the parent. Also, the child's greatness is from the parent, because whatever the child achieves is because they're an expression of the essence of the parent. Just the parent may not have actualized that, and the child does. All this tells us that when you give birth, you give of your essence. Because what you give birth to is a child that's like you, but not like you in your revealed self. It's like your essence, like your inner self. That's what the child inherits. Why is that? The fact that you give birth to a child, and that child is similar to your essence, it's because what you give to give birth, what you give to a child, is a part of your essence. That what you give to the child is the etzem, and within the etzem comes the light that is one with the kli, the inner part of the kli. Okay, so what has this metaphor shown us? The difference between teaching and giving birth. Both of them, you're taking a part of yourself and you're sharing it with somebody else. But which part of yourself do you share when you teach? Chitzonius, an external part of yourself, a watered down, diluted part of self. Which part of you do you share when you give birth? Your essence. You give your essence to the next generation.
What about like Torah, like Hashem gives the Torah, right? Which is like giving us His wisdom, and you say that the Torah is actually part of Hashem.
Yeah.
So is that also chitzonius?
In some ways, it is chitzonius because it's enclosed in physical things.
But we say it's like things.
Yeah. Yeah, but here it's talking about the soul itself. The soul itself. This is what this metaphor is being used for here. That the soul itself, our soul, is coming from pnimius hakelim. Pnimius hakelim means that we experience that it's not a watered down version of elokus that becomes our soul, but it is the light itself, the inner part of the divine energy that becomes our soul. Even though our soul comes from kelim, but it comes from pnimius hakelim, the inner part of the keli, which is one with the light. Which part of the light? The light as it is in its essence, not the diluted light as it's come down. So it's like our soul is not a teaching of wisdom from a teacher to a student. Our soul is a child of Hashem. So,
is it chitzonius because the way we receive it? Because if we could completely understand it, comprehend everything, then it would be like pnimius.
Right. So that's the next thing explains that. The next sentence. So we just said The fact that you give birth to something that is like your essence is because what you give when you give birth is a part of your essence. And so in the etzem that you give to a child, within that is the light that is one with the pnimius hakli, the inner side of the kli. Now even when you give birth, when you do give birth, you give birth to a separate being, something outside of you. And so therefore that must go through some type of vessel, of container. But it doesn't come through hishtalshelus. Giving birth is not a hishtalshelus thing. It comes through an interruption, durch a sprung, a jump. There's a leap. Giving birth is not a hishtalshelus process. There's a leap. There's a sudden expression of self, of essence. You could never through hishtalshelus give a part of your essence to outside of you. Essence, if it would go through hishtalshelus, it wouldn't be essence anymore. Hishtalshelus means a dilution, a watering down. Whereas giving of your essence has to happen suddenly, has to happen with a jump. And that's what giving birth is. So this is all a metaphor. With fourth last line. The so too our soul. The source of our soul is in the essence of Hashem. It's drawn down through the light. And this is something that angels are not result of the essence of Hashem. They're not expression of the essence. Only souls are. Because souls are sourced in the inner part of the vessel, which is one with the light, which is essence. And through the connection to the inner part of the light, they're sourced in the etzem ha'er. Der etzem ha'er kommt sich. The next page. That because our souls are one with the essence, with the inner part of the light, so we're connected to the source where the light comes from. So with this we've understood, hopefully, that even though the source of the soul, we said, is from kelim, not which sounded a bit disappointing, the source of our soul is not the light, but it's the vessel, the container. Or we said that the source of the soul is from chitzonius ak, the outer level of Adam Kadmon. But because the inner part of the vessel is one with the light, not like the outside of the vessel, which is there for the next level, the inner part of the vessel is there with connected to the light. So therefore it's connected to the inner part of Ak as well. So this whole section that we just did, the Rebbe, it was like a whole pilpul. It was like almost like a Talmudic back and forth to try and prove where the source of the soul is. What the Rebbe is trying to do is trying to show that even sources that say that our soul comes from Kelim and Chitzonius Ak, sounding like lower levels, don't worry. That's, if you look at it deeper, you'll see that our soul comes from the highest level, from the essence. The Rebbe here, in saying a Maamar, when the Rebbe said a Maamar, it was to bring out not just an intellectual point, but to reveal a certain level of reality. When a Maamar was said, it was not just to inform us of something, but it was to connect us to an idea. And so by explaining where the soul comes from, and showing how even when it says that we come from Kelim or Chitzonius Ak, which sounds external, but really it's connecting us to the Pnimius, to the essence, what the Rebbe is trying to do is connect our souls to the higher source, and to prove to us, to show to us where your soul comes from. That's why it's such an important issue.
So it's the external part of the vessel, but before that there was a jump from more.
To get from essence to down here, there has to be a jump, not a hishtalshelus. If it's a hishtalshelus means dilution. If it's a jump, so then it means the original reaches down here.
Which is higher.
Yeah. This is similar to an idea explained in Lekutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe. There's a Maamar Lamnatzeach al Shminis. Shahamila hi l'mayla b'Shabbos. That Maamar says that bris milah is higher than Shabbos. Why? The fact that you can do a bris on Shabbos is because bris is higher than Shabbos, is a higher idea than Shabbos. The Shabbos hu shivus me'hekef, because Shabbos is the 7th of the 7 days of creation, the 7 days of this world. Ugshamim yardim b'Shabbos shu inyan chitzonius ak. Sorry. Ugshamim yardim b'Shabbos shu inyan chitzonius ak. And it can rain on Shabbos because, which represents chitzonius ak, the outer level of ak. We'll see in a minute. Umila hi pnimius ak, shu l'mayla m'Shabbos. Bris milah is pnimius ak, which is higher than Shabbos. That's why to have a bris, you have to pass a Shabbos. You have to experience a Shabbos to have a bris. A bris can only be on the 8th day, which means every child that has a bris would have already had a Shabbos. You have to pass Shabbos, you have to go higher than Shabbos to have a bris. But nevertheless, it does have somewhat of a connection to Shabbos, which is chitzonius ak. Only by having a Shabbos, which is chitzonius ak, can you experience the bris milah, which is pnimius ak, which shows that even bris milah is connected to Shabbos. Even pnimius ak is connected to chitzonius ak. Which also indicates for us that neshamas that are sourced in chitzonius ak, nevertheless are connected to pnimius ak. The Rebbe has just brought another proof to show that even though it says that our soul is sourced in chitzonius ak, the outer level of ak, not pnimius ak, but if you're sourced in chitzonius ak, you're connected to pnimius ak as well. What's the proof? Bris milah. How do we get there? That Shabbos is holy. Bris milah is even holier. Shabbos is connected to chitzonius ak. Bris milah is connected to pnimius ak. But to have a bris, you have to have Shabbos. You have to have passed by a Shabbos. To reach pnimius ak, you need chitzonius ak. So therefore, chitzonius ak is not a separate entity to pnimius ak. They're interconnected. So if our soul is sourced in chitzonius ak, that means we're connected to pnimius ak as well. That was how we got that. We proved it.
You can't separate the inside and the outside of a cup either.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's saying here even more than that. That it's really one thing. That it's really one entity. So you can talk about chitzonius and pnimius, but it's not two separate entities. It's two sides of the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. So what is all this to prove? The Rebbe concludes, with this we can understand why it's the nature of the Jewish soul that we cannot be separate from Hashem. We can't. Because our source is in the essence of Hashem, and we are similar to Him, as it were, like a child is similar to the parent. And which part of the parent is the child similar? The essence of the parent. So too our soul is an expression of the essence. So therefore we are similar to it. We look like Him. Now what does it mean we're sourced in the essence of Hashem, which is what we've tried to prove through this whole chapter. What does it mean that we're sourced in the essence of Hashem? What is the essence of Hashem? What is the definition of the essence of Hashem? It means the level where there is nothing else, that nothing else exists but God. That's what essence means. Your essence means the part of you that is totally you and there's nothing else there. That's what an essence is. The essence of Hashem means the level of Hashem where there is nothing else exists, there's just Hashem. If our soul is sourced in the essence, what does that mean? That means that our very identity is defined by a godliness that leaves no room for anything else. There's only God, there's nothing else but Hashem. So therefore, it's not possible for us to be separate from Hashem. It's not an option, because our soul is sourced in the essence, and in the essence there is nothing else. So any concept or idea or action or activity that will separate us from Hashem is simply not an option for our soul. It's just not there. Can't be. It's an impossibility. So how is it possible for us then to sin? How can we sometimes do something that does separate us from Hashem? So whatever it is, it must be something that can allow us to act completely counter to our nature. That we can do something totally ridiculous and sin. It's an absurdity to sin. It's going against your very nature, because your nature is, your soul is sourced in the essence where there is only Hashem and nothing else. So to do something that will counter that is ridiculous. That's why a Jewish soul does not want and cannot separate from Hashem. It's not an option. In the next section, we'll describe how we can sometimes be absurd and separate from Hashem.